Welcome to the Breaking News Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Capone, joined alongside my co-host once again, Evan Davis, and there have been some pretty massive moves made across the MLB over the holiday break. Notable stars including Boris clients like Corbin Burnes going to the Arizona Diamondbacks, Teoscar Hernandez running it back with the World Series champion LA Dodgers. However, there are still notable free agents available on the market as we enter 2025. Some of the more notable position players include Pete Alonso and Anthony Santander, but most interestingly is that the market for relief pitchers is as cold as ice, with no real traction on where some pitchers are heading, like Tanner Scott, Carlos Estevez, and Jeff Hoffman as some notable examples. All that and more to be discussed over the episode, including the ineptitude of the Baltimore Orioles and their failure over this offseason. Evan, I think we'll start with that. What do you make of the Orioles offseason so far?
It's really, really disappointing. And when you look at it, like, I thought because new ownership was taking over, this would be a team that would be willing to spend. You saw the trade deadline really just be a failure for them, trading Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers for Trevor Rogers. That was an absolute failure. Trevor Rogers didn't even make the Baltimore Orioles for past 2 weeks before he got sent down to AAA. So that was just utter disgust. You look at it even with just Sir Anthony Dominguez, okay, like Gregory Soto, like some of the moves they made were just really questionable. But you have this nucleus in place where, you have Gunnar Henderson, you have Adley Rutschman, you have Heston Kjerstad, you have Jackson Holiday. And yes, one of the worries probably from ownership is like, look, at some point, all these guys are going to be getting huge paydays. And how are we going to allocate all this money? Like, that's what's great about having young talent is that you don't have to pay them. But when you do have to pay them, it's like, well, holy smokes, what do we do? Like all of these guys at around the same time need new contracts. But yeah, to go into this coming season where the American League is so wide open with Juan Soto going to the Mets, and you look at all the talent that even Corbin Burnes now leaving the Orioles and going to the Diamondbacks, like the National League is a gauntlet right now. And if you're the Baltimore Orioles, like how did you not even think or even at least do anything in your power to get Max Fried in the building? And I get the Yankees overpaid for him, but even a guy like Blake Snell, like that wasn't that terrible of a contract that he signed. And I mean, you can't, as the fan base, to say, yeah, like we're going from Corbin Burnes to a 41-year-old and Charlie Morton and a pitcher from the KBO who's 35 years old and isn't a huge strikeout guy. Like, look, there's still Jack Flaherty on the board. According to multiple of those MLB insiders, he hated his time in Baltimore, so that's probably out the window. But I mean, there's not a lot of young pitchers left outside of Jack Flaherty. Everyone is 30 plus. It's just a really disappointing offseason. And when you look at the amount of talent in terms of starting pitchers like a Luis Severino, even a Yusei Kikuchi, Walker Bueller, you could have even taken a flyer on. Like, really disappointing with the Baltimore Orioles because their rotation is poo-poo.
I mean, yeah, you just think about it. All the good starting pitchers are pretty much gone. Everyone else, like you said, is old. Justin Verlander, Kyle Gibson, Heen Dog is still available. Patrick
Hmm.
Corbin, Michael Lorenzen. Like there aren't really many good names left, and it seems like the Orioles are just sticking it with this rotation as they have right now. And is that really what they want to do? Zach Eflin as their ace in the big 2025? Like, granted, Zach Eflin was, decent last year, and he was like probably their best move they made at the trade deadline with the 260 ERA and 9 games
Hmm.
pitched for them. But is he really the number one guy on a team that you think can be a contender? Like, he's not really that kind of a guy. I don't think of him as
Hmm.
the ace on a World Series caliber staff. You need someone who's like a top 10 pitcher in baseball.
Hmm.
I don't even think it's crazy to say that is Zach Eflin not even top 20 in baseball right now. Like I don't see this Baltimore, and they already had struggles with their rotation last year. Albert Suarez was filling in multiple games for them. They had so many injuries with their pitching staff. This
Hmm.
is not new, nothing new to the Baltimore Orioles, and you've seen how uh it wasn't even really the pitching's fault. It was more of the hitting fault
Hmm.
in the wild card series against the Royals.
Hmm.
But it's still just like what more can this team really do besides like there's not that many people available that are going to turn around this franchise. They're going to have
Mhm.
such a down year next year unless somehow Trevor Rogers comes out of his whatever the hell he was in and turns into the like Max Fried making $2 million a year. Like
Mhm.
that's not happening.
Mhm.
The Orioles just had one of the worst off seasons I think a team with such young promise could have ever like had.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like you look at the team that's going into this season, it's a phenomenal team and in a division that's still very winnable. Like I don't trust the Yankees really because even with Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, they were still neck and neck with the Baltimore Orioles for the division title. It kind of just got away from the Orioles in that final week or so of the season, but I know this is a talk about the Orioles, but you can't replace Juan Soto with the Yankees. And yeah, you could say they got better. I just think they overpaid for a lot of talent. And I don't know how it will really work out. But when you look at the offense of the Baltimore Orioles, we mentioned Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holiday, Ryan Mountcastle, Ryan O'Hearn, like Jordan Westberg, people forget about. He was injured through a good portion of the season. He also could have been the starting second baseman for the AL All-Star team. And then you have Colton Cowser as well in the outfield, and Tyler O'Neill now, who is kind of replacing Anthony Santander, but for Tyler O'Neill to be your biggest offseason acquisition is just it's kind of disappointing. And again, like I just really thought with new ownership, you would have really revitalized this starting pitching staff, which is good and it has high ceilings, but a lot of these guys also have very low floors. Like a guy like Kyle Bradish can get you 10 punchies in a game, but he can also give up 7 runs in a game, similar to Dean Kramer. And Zach Eflin did look better, but you know, I just, Cade Povich is also getting into his own as a lefty, Grayson Rodriguez as well. So maybe they look at this and just say, you know, outside of the top three, it was a very top heavy starting pitching free agent class. Maybe it just didn't make sense to spend that type of money on a pitcher. They probably also wanted a guy like Nick Pivetta, but the Red Sox, rightfully so, put a qualifying offer on him, and I don't know if Boston or if the Orioles really want to waste a draft pick on Nick Pivetta.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to bring up is that you bring up Tyler O'Neill kind of being the replacement for Anthony Santander. Tyler O'Neill's a right-handed batter, and the left field in Camden Yards is really pushed back. It's going to be
Mhm.
really hard for him to kind of
Well, they
output
moved
that.
it in, no?
Did they move it in a little bit more? The
Yeah, I
left.
thought the Orioles moved it in. That was the whole reason Tyler O'Neill said he was
Oh,
that he went to Baltimore.
I thought it was still going to be the same, like
No.
almost 400 feet. How much more
No,
did they
they
move it
moved it
in?
in. I don't, they moved it back. They said that they were going to move it back in like a couple weeks ago.
Okay, I guess I stand corrected. But yeah, I just thought like I still think Santander is gonna be one of the huge more free agents still available, and I still think the Orioles just giving up on him right away, like not even
Mhm.
giving him like I don't know. I just think they signed Tyler O'Neill way too quickly and kind of given up on re-signing Santander so early into the offseason when I still think he could have been a really valuable piece for them
Mhm.
to have kept around on their team. But moving on, we could talk about with the Orioles, there's a potential with a Luis Castillo trade that John Morosi brought up. And this is another one of the things where it's like, how much are you willing to give up? You already gave up, DL Hall and Joey Ortiz to Milwaukee for 1 year of Corbin Burnes.
Mhm.
Uh, how much more are you willing to give up for another starting pitcher that, granted, he's on a longer deal. He won't just be a 1 year rental, at least that's what it seems.
Yeah.
Like what more do you think of this? Like, do you think that they obviously have the talent or the amount of young players and prospects to actually get the deal done, but do
Mhm.
you think it's feasible for Baltimore to do another big trade for another ace just a year after losing one?
Yeah, I think this one makes more sense for the Baltimore Orioles because Luis Castillo's has 3 years left on his contract coming into this season, and there's a vesting option for a fourth year, which the Baltimore Orioles could certainly pick up. I think when you look at the Baltimore Orioles and you look at their prospects, like again, although they screwed up and gave up uh they gave up Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby, two guys who honestly could have been used. in this Luis Castillo deal. Look, I look at a guy like Samuel Basallo, who number two prospect in the Baltimore Orioles system, a catcher, and also can play first base. They've talked about him being a replacement for Ryan Mountcastle. This is a guy who is already at AAA at 20 years old. He's 6'4", so he honestly has the body frame to be both a first baseman and a catcher. But if you're looking at a guy like Luis Castillo, I think this is a guy that you would probably have to give up just given the pedigree of Luis Castillo. And again, this could be an overpay. They could get by without giving up their number two prospect in the system, but I just think the fact that there's 3 years, potentially 4 years left on Castillo's contract, you're talking about giving up a lot. Do you give up Griffo Farrell, who's their number seven prospect according to MLB.com? He's a shortstop, 21 in high A. If you think Jackson Holiday's your future at short, or also Gunnar Henderson, you don't really need a 21-year-old in high A. He might do better off with the Seattle Mariners. Maybe he could find his way higher up in the system. They still have a ton of talent left in their farm system. I just think if you don't want to give up as many prospects, Samuel Basallo might be your best one because that like if offers continue to come in, this is a guy that you could give up and then maybe give up another like a smaller piece as well because a guy in Samuel Basallo could play first base for the Seattle Mariners, not this coming season, but next season potentially.
Yeah, I think it's another move where the Orioles need to do something, and they have this good rotation starting off right now, or this awful rotation starting off right now. Like the rest of their team, 41-year-old Charlie Morton starting, giving him a 1 year, $15 million deal. You already said with Cade Povich and Grayson Rodriguez, they have some pieces, and I think, you lose Corbin Burnes, you need to find something as a way to get something back. Like this is just it's too it would be too stupid for this new ownership to go to this new tier to buy the Orioles, make a trade for Corbin Burnes, lose him, and then just stay stagnant. It
Mhm,
would look so bad on the team, look so bad on the fans, and they would hate ownership more than they just did the last group.
mhm,
Uh, but yeah, moving on, I guess we could talk about the relief pitching market and
mhm,
how unbelievably cold it has been.
mhm.
There are still some really good free agent pitchers still available. Carlos Estevez, Tanner Scott, Jeff Hoffman. These are just some of the names. Two of them are Phillies, and two of them are all stars this past year. What do you make about the pitching market starting off so slow? Like we're already into the new year, and a lot of these guys are still available.
Yeah, it's just wild to me. Like, even a guy like Kenley Jansen, Ryan Presley, you look at it and it's so weird to me. And only given the fact that the Dodgers literally just won a World Series because of their bullpen. You saw how important it is to have a really stout and dominant pen. And that was the huge reason why the Phillies lost uh, to the Mets was because their bullpen ERA was above 11. And it's crazy that, it could just also come down to money. Like it's reported that Tanner Scott wants a huge pay raise. Like this was a guy that was making just under 6 million a year. He's 30 years old. He wants apparently $20 million. I I just don't see that for a reliever. I think $20 million for a reliever is just absolutely asinine to even suggest, but I don't understand it. And it's not that teams aren't interested in the players. Like I'm surprised even a guy like Kyle Finnegan is still on the board. Like what are these teams doing that they don't want these great relievers? I just don't get it. Even a guy like Tommy Kahnle with that nasty changeup, but I know like the whole market's kind of weird with Jeff Hoffman because he says he wants to be a starter as well, so kind of wants that Clay Holmes type of thing. I don't know how then you're really limiting your teams because contenders don't really want to experiment with that type of thing. Um, so I don't really know about that, but even, guys like Paul Sewald, like these are still very solid relievers. I think it's just more that they're waiting to see what Tanner Scott does because he's the big domino within the relief market.
Yeah, and it really depends on what he's going to be end up making as a relief pitcher because I think everyone's scared of what happened with last year and Josh Hader and how much he made on his deal, signing for 5 years, 95 million. That's a lot of money for, a relief pitcher. And people kind of see that, hey, maybe it's not the smartest thing to, sign a reliever for for such a large, financial investment because relievers are could be wish-washy from year to year. You're not getting a guaranteed, Mariano Rivera. We've seen that with Josh Hader this past year, 71 games, 34 saves, but a 380 ERA. Granted, his whip was under one. He still had 105 strikeouts, but there's still just something about, you know, maybe we could get away with something where it's like a guy we can transform into a closer or
Mhm.
somebody who has good stuff and we can kind of do closer by committee. You kind
Mhm.
of seen that with the Dodgers where they like you said their bullpen. Yeah, they had Trinan and they had like all these other guys on their bullpen, but it was more of just like whoever could go out there as much as they can and do the best job. Like it's not always got to be a guaranteed closer at the end of the day. I think it's going to be more of like this. Teams are looking to not pay as much on the back end of the of a guy who might not even pitch for a day. Like it's something where there has to be some sort of break in this where we can find new pitchers, new uh cheaper options to find rather than paying 20 million for a guy like Tanner Scott.
Yeah, and yeah, to your point, like when we look at other teams, like they're not trying to spend upwards of $10 million on a reliever. If you look at it, like a lot of these relievers are making bare bones, which is unfortunate, but it's just because, they're not pitching as many innings. Like even a guy like I don't know. I look at it like this. The only reliever in the MLB right now I would even consider giving $20 million to is Emmanuel Clase. Like everyone else, I am not even thinking about $20 million. And I think teams are also looking at what the Houston Astros did with Josh Hader last season, where they give him the 5 years for 95 million. That's just under 20 million a year. And look, he struggled a lot coming out, and even in the playoffs is when he just completely deteriorated. So if I'm a team, why would I want to spend nearly 20 starter type money on a reliever? It just doesn't make sense. And we're a month away from spring training, and I just think some of these players, like, do you want a job or not? Because at the end of the day, you're still making a stupendous amount of money to play baseball. So you just got to think, like, yeah, even if Tanner Scott gets 12 and a half, $14 million a year, that's still great money.
Yeah, it's still a great amount of money. And like you said, starter money for a guy who's going to be pitching, let's say a third of the innings at best. It's something not that, or maybe like it's 71 innings compared to let's say a really good starter is like 190, it's still like you're getting not that much of the same output, but you're paying the same amount of money for a guy. Granted, he can, yeah, maybe he can lock up a game for you to guarantee a win. But you know who else could do that? Probably half of your rotate. If you're a good team, you probably
Mhm.
already have a good bullpen. So you wouldn't need to spend $20 million on a guy like a Tanner Scott. You could
Mhm.
probably find, hey, we could get some better options. Like I don't know, like a Yimi Garcia or whatever. Just find
Mhm.
somebody out there that can close the game for you for relatively cheap. Maybe the highest paid closer or relief pitcher you have is around like 10 million because
Mhm.
that seems more feasible for teams to be able to want to spend money and be like, okay, well, we can deal with like spending 10 million on Kyle Finnegan. But yeah, I just
Mhm.
think asking for as like even greater than some starters for money is insane for some relievers to be doing. And that's what makes it, so odd.
Yeah, like I just pulled up the Dodgers payroll from last season. You look at it, Bonda made 740,000. Alex Vesia made 1 million. Blake Trinan 1 million. Michael Kopech 3 million. Daniel Hudson 2 million. Evan Phillips 4 million. Brazier 4.5 million. You're talking about the backbone of this entire World Series run, and combined, they made about like what? 15 to 20 million all combined. And again, a lot of that just has to do with arbitration and all that, but nonetheless, like it proves that you can find an entire bullpen for the price of Tanner Scott, which I think teams are now starting to realize where it's just like, yeah, that's unfortunate as a reliever that you don't get paid as much. Well, then become a starter, pitch more innings, then you'll get more money.
Yeah. And that's why some players like Clay Holmes are and Jordan Hicks last year. Jordan Hicks
Hmm.
went over to the Giants to become a starter. He did awful and now he's back in the bullpen. Like
Hmm.
it's something where it's not made for some guys, especially you never know with some relievers what they're gonna end up actually being. Clay Holmes is one of those guys where it's like uh yeah, he took a situation where he wasn't doing good with the Yankees. He did blown like so many saves this past year, and said,
Hmm.
"Screw it, I could go to the Mets and make money that I was probably never going to make again as a relief pitcher and make that as a starter."
Hmm.
And it's something that they can do now. Moving on, let's talk about your Dodgers and re-signing Teoscar Hernandez. What do you make of that move? Just like personally, as a Jays fan, I was thinking, damn it, like I wanted Teoscar just to, you know, come back to
Hmm.
the Jays, obviously, for whatever amount of money. But seeing what he got with the Dodgers, 3 years, 66 million, the $24 million signing bonus, all that. What do you make of the of bringing back Teo for 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked it. This is a guy who kind of sparked the, not kind of, he did spark the offense. What, hit 33 home runs, 99 RBIs, batted 273. Like, it's a great contract for the Dodgers, and Teoscar Hernandez openly admitted in his press conference that he took a lot less to come back to LA, which it's great for the team. I think it says a lot just about maybe the culture that's being built in LA. He said that he left upwards of $6 million on the table, which $6 million is $6 million. And you look at it, I think it's a perfect deal in terms of even the years, because he's 32 years old. He'll be 35 when the contract is up. It's a perfect sweet spot for the Dodgers as well, where you're not really teetering into maybe Teoscar's downfall years, but then you can also, you know what, Teoscar can maybe get like a 1 year deal somewhere else, or like he can maybe re-up for a year, one last hurrah somewhere. But you look at it like, so he'll be playing right field, his natural position, because Mookie Betts wants to be a Gold Glove shortstop, so he can add to his already Hall of Fame resume. But with Conforto in left, Teoscar in right, like you don't have the best defense in the outfield. But I mean, let's be honest, there's only so few outfielders that actually play elite defense. So if as long as your offense makes up for it, I really don't care.
Yeah, and one more thing with the Dodgers, signing Sung Kim from KBO. He was
Hmm.
a, high batting average, low OPS kind of guy, like 700 OPS.
Hmm.
Uh, and he signed on the last day of his posting,
Hmm.
signing with the Dodgers.
Hmm.
Really good defensive stud.
Hmm.
What do you make of that deal, real quick?
Yeah, well, I mean, apparently this guy is Ichiro Suzuki, the way that the MLB Twitter was talking about him, saying like, "Oh my God, the Dodgers get everyone, the Dodgers get everyone." He was only worth $4.5 million, and what I've heard is like, look, he didn't hit that many home runs in the KBO, so I can't imagine him, hitting 30 home runs in a season with the Dodgers. Like, God forbid the Dodgers just sign a bench piece. Like, I didn't realize that it was that big of a deal. It's not Roki Sasaki, okay? Like, yes, this guy hits for average and he steals a ton of bases. What I make of the move quickly is like the Dodgers don't have a lot of speed when it comes to the base path. And now that Shohei Ohtani is said to be pitching starting in May, he was your stolen base guy. The Dodgers really didn't have anybody else besides that. So, look, you get Sung Kim, who stole 30 bags last year. Now you get speed on the bases. He'll probably bat in the nine hole on most days. I wonder how they platoon it. Gavin Lux and Sung Kim both play second base. Sung Kim won 3 straight Gold Gloves at second base. So you're getting an elite player who's only 25 years old. I look at it as, look, the Dodgers could trade Gavin Lux. He would have the most value in terms of like being the odd man out with Taylor, Rojas, Betts, Edman, like all these guys. Edman's probably playing center field, but when you look at Kim, he's a left-handed hitter. Lux is a right-handed hitter. You, he is a right. Am I tripping? Are they both lefties? Am I
Wait, what,
like,
Gavin Lux,
is
and
Gavin Lux a lefty or a righty? Am I tripping
he's a
out?
left-handed
Oh
batter.
my God. Yeah, you're right. He is a left-handed hitter. Wait, sorry. Been up for a little bit already, but yeah, you know what? Then that actually does change my what that does keep the perspective that I had. I do think Gavin Lux gets traded now that I'm remembering again what I was supposed to say. But yeah, like when you look at this, Lux has the most value. This is a guy through his last 64 games was batting over 300, really came to shine, but definitely would be adding more value to another team. John Morosi was talking about the Seattle Mariners, like Andreas Munoz, like, por favor, please, can we have you? That would be great. Um, I just think that would be ideal for the Mariners, a team that needs offense. Obviously, Gavin Lux isn't going to come in there hitting 25, 30 home runs, but he was really good towards the end of last season when he finally got back from his ACL injury and became the offensive firepower that the Dodgers were expecting when they drafted him and then called him up and all that. So interesting, cheap deal. Apparently, this guy's Ichiro. I don't know.
Yeah, Gavin Lux with the move or with John Morosi apparently saying that the Seattle Mariners are interested in acquiring him. That's a really it's a really interesting move for on behalf of the Dodgers, where yeah, you can kind of move Hyun Kim into that Gavin Lux role, and now you have uh Gavin Lux on the move to the Mariners, and
Hmm.
whatever the Mariners would send over for that. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
moving on, I'll just ask you a quick question. Uh, with Pete Alonso still on the market, when do you think that he and Scott Boras finally budge? And, does he just go back to the Mets or does he decide to do something else?
Look, I don't know. I feel like Pete Alonso has kind of shot himself in the foot here. Him and Boris, like I don't know what the game plan is because if I'm the Mets, it's like, you know what? Like, screw you. Like, if you don't want this money, and there's clearly not a better contract on the table because he would have then accepted that offer. Like, if I'm David Stearns and I'm Steve Cohen, I think at some point you kind of just got to be like, F you to Pete Alonso. Like, if you don't want to come back, go find another offer. Like giving Pete Alonso 3 years at 90 million, $30 million a year gives him the highest AAV by a first baseman, and it beats it out by quite a bit. Like when you look at even guys like Freddie Freeman and even now Christian Walker, not to compare these guys to Pete Alonso, but yeah, I mean, like they're fairly similar in terms of overall talent. They're making $20 million is Christian Walker and around 25, 26 million is Freddie Freeman. Like, dude, you're making 3.5 million more. You get a 3-year deal, maybe throw in an opt-out, see what happens. But look, this is exactly what happened with Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, is that, there just wasn't the right offer, and by the time the right offer came, they really stunk the bed.
Yeah, and that's just something where with what it's just what Scott Boras clients do. They wait until the last possible moment, but I think there has to be a way just for him to budge and say, okay, we'll take 3 years, 100 million to go to the Mets. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like that's probably the best offer on the table around that right now. I think uh the most recent report was that he declined something was 3 years, 90 million, where it would be it's still a $30 million average. And I feel
Hmm.
like maybe if he could push it up to get a little bit more, you get 100 million, there would be kind of a an option for that, but
Hmm.
it's just kind of weird. Uh and one thing else I want to ask you about is Anthony Santander. We talked about him earlier in the pod about how the Orioles kind of just let him go way too early in the offseason. That's what we believe. Uh, the teams that are still interested in him are the Toronto Blue Jays and Detroit Tigers. They seem like the two teams that are the ones that are really going for him. And another one that's interesting is Alex Bregman, who's still available out there. That seems like another two teams that are vying for him here for his services are the Detroit Tigers and the Toronto Blue Jays. It seems like both of these teams, it seems like one of them is going to get one and one of them is going to get the other. I feel like it's unless one team really overpays for both, I feel like it's going to be one goes here and one goes there. If the Jays do strike out completely this offseason and they somehow lose out on literally everyone that they've ever sent an offer to,
Hmm.
what do you think this means for potential, Bo Bichette extension and even more potential Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extension?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from you too, but I think when you look at it, like if the Blue Jays don't get anyone this offseason, I think you do have to just trade both of these guys and get as much value back as you can. Because realistically, from Vladdy's standpoint, like the Jays within the next 5 years, if they strike out on everyone this free agency, like what is their team going to be in 5 years from now? Kevin Gausman's going to be gone. Chris Bassett's going to be gone. Obviously, Jordan Romano is gone. Like if I'm Vladdy, I want to win. And if a contender is offering me a nice ticket, like I'm taking the ticket from the contender. And with Bo Bichette, you just see year by year his offense has declined and he's been injured a ton. Like if I'm the Jays, I think you got to realize what your identity is and you got to blow it up, get as much value as you can and trade Vladdy sooner rather than later. Like give a team a full season with him rather than like waiting until the deadline because then you're just going to get pennies on the dollar for Vladdy. Like you're not going to get a really great return. Like you'll still get a team's maybe top 10 prospect, but maybe instead of getting one, you can get two or even three. So I just think if they strike out on Santander, if they don't get Jack Flaherty, if they don't get Alex Bregman, like just blow it up and then contend for a high draft pick in this upcoming draft and just see where you go from there. But the one thing you can't have happen if you're the Toronto Blue Jays is let Vladdy walk out the door for absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue that's kind of like the doomsday scenario for all Blue Jays fans is having Vladdy walk out for nothing. And, there's already been kind of rumblings about like, well, are the Jays gonna have to make a trade this season for Vladdy? Like trade him
Hmm.
away to whatever team gives the best offer. Because kind of like a Juan Soto situation, but this time it's even worse because you'd only be getting half a year of Vladdy compared to a year and a half that the Padres got for Juan Soto.
Hmm.
Um, and the Yankees ended up getting or the Padres ended up getting a pretty good haul for Juan
Yeah,
Soto from the Yankees
for 1 year.
for one season. Um, and what would the Jays be able to get for Vladdy? Now, obviously, Juan Soto is one of the top players in baseball, and so is Vladdy, but Juan Soto's on a different echelon of top
Hmm.
players in the league.
Hmm.
Um, and Vladdy has had years where he had the great year in 2021, and he had a good this year, this past year, 2024, he had a good season. But 2022 and 2023, he was really unlucky with his hits. He was supposed to be one of the top hitters in baseball, but he was just super unlucky with all of his metrics were just down in the weirdest ways possible. So it's really interesting to see what the Jays would be forced to do. Their hand would be forced to do anything else other than trade him away to whatever team was looking for him. Like it's really weird to say that they should have been thinking of doing an extension way earlier than they had been. Now it almost seems like it's too late where you're gonna have to give him he's already seen Juan Soto's money, and there's been an interview that he had with another Spanish YouTube channel
Hmm.
saying where he said, "I'm giving them until the first day of spring training uh, to get a deal done. If they don't have it done by then, well, then I'm just going to play the whole season, and we'll see what happens after that." And talked about his other grievances he's had over the years, and it's scary to see as a Jays fan where there's a lot of things that he's kind of airing out where he wasn't allowed to play third base because he was too fat coming in one year. Uh, and he's basically been forced to play first. And granted, he's this past year he played a couple games at third, but it's still something interesting where it's like he's had some issues with the organization. And during his time here, what more can the organization do rather than just keep lowballing him in these offers? And
Hmm.
what's it going to mean for the future of the Jays franchise?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to your point about the whole Juan Soto thing, like, look, the Padres got back Michael King, who's one of the best starting pitchers in the MLB, really underrated. They get Drew Thorpe, who they used to get Dylan Cease. You're right. Like, you're not going to get that type of package for Vladdy, but maybe instead of getting that young prospect in Drew Thorpe, you get a solid starting pitcher, like a young solid starting pitcher from someone. Like, there's a ton of teams that can use a first baseman that can mash, you know, 35 home runs. And I just think when you look at teams that are out there, like, everyone also has a very young, talented starting pitcher. And why not? Like, why not bring in Vladdy? And if you're the Blue Jays, just say the hell with it. At least don't leave your fans on the hook that you're trying to contend or whatever.
Yeah, that's the worst thing I've heard about it, where it's like they keep, trying to convince everyone, hey, we're still contenders, we could still win the AL East. And it's like every single move that they've made over the past couple of years has been like
Hmm.
slowly declining. You signed
Hmm.
George Springer, and obviously, you front load that contract with George Springer because you wanted it to be you know, you pay for the services early and you kind of deal with it later on because you wanted the talent of George Springer, but he hadn't really stayed healthy those first couple years. Now we're getting into the back years of his contract, and he's 35. How much has he really got left in the tank to really play in the outfield every day? But yeah, it's just a lot of these moves, they've really missed their championship window. I feel like their championship window was 2021, and they missed it by a couple games. And that was their really best year to contend. 2022 was still a solid team, but they didn't have the thump in the lineup with an extra, with Marcus Semien in there. You really lose everything that you had. And that was your real best shot to contend for a World Series.
Hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's just the reality of being a Toronto sports fan.
Yeah. Anyways, that'll just about do it for this episode of the Breaking News Bears podcast. I once again want to thank my co-host Evan Davis. I once again want to thank you guys, the listeners, for listening to, another episode of the Breaking News Bears podcast. We'll be back with another episode in a week's time. Thank you again once for watching.